sometimes like you realize an actor is as good at their job as they are when they make a line is stupid and it's just in there to like is like needed, but you're like, this is dumb and I don't know a way to not make it dumb. And then they say it and you go, what a great line. Hey,
Hello, how are you?
good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I've got to start off with a question that's killing me, okay?
Yeah.
So, how do you pull off like leaving breadcrumbs throughout, but like then you don't really know until like all is revealed at the end? And I know that's so hard to talk about without spoilers, but like how do you pull off like that when you think back, you're like, "Oh my gosh, all these
Was that
breadcrumbs
your
were there."
experience?
That was my experience. So that's what I need to
Oh,
know.
that is amazing. Listen, that's the best news I've heard all day. That was really hard. I mean, I had never really done something that functioned like had this much genre sort of thriller elements to it, even though that's it's a sort of different version of that. And that was the thing that throughout the writing, the shooting, and the editing was the most sort of up in the air, right? It was like the most difficult to nail down because you want the audience to be engaged. You don't want to, since we're not doing some like super large scale conspiracy or something like that. You know what I mean? Where all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's they're putting things in the water, or like, then you need things to fuel that, but you also want to stay within your world. So I'm still hoping just that it worked. So I don't know how to answer your question. I really appreciate it.
It's hard to without like full on spoilers to dive
Yeah,
into,
yeah,
but like, yeah, it's one of those where you're like, wait a minute, if I go back and rewatch this, I'm gonna completely know, like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? And like
totally.
you know exactly what I'm talking about. So that really worked for
That's
me.
the
So
hope. Yeah,
yeah,
because to then yeah. Anyways,
yeah,
whatever.
exactly. It's so hard to say without spoilers, but you know
Yeah.
what I'm talking about. But I'd love to know too, like what kind of outside inspirations, like what other films kind of inspired The Good Mother?
A bunch, when we were coming up with the idea, we came up with it in 2015 when we were on the set of our first film, Madison and I. We wanted to do kind of a trilogy about our hometown. But I had just gotten out of college and I was really thinking a lot about like, I loved noirs. I think like everyone, I go through a period of just like being obsessed. I like still am to a certain degree. But more so out of the noir stuff, the sort of like political context of it, of coming out of World War II, and it sort of being this reaction to like a society that feels like it has no moral center, it has no like objective truth or anything like that. And I don't know if you remember, but 2015, 16, there was an election that came up. There was sort of this feeling in the air of like, oh, word, fascism is rising again, and like there's like young people dying everywhere in like record numbers. No one is talking about it because everyone's talking about the election. And there was sort of this feeling, and we experienced friends who died from what now we assume what were fentanyl overdoses. And also this idea that they're of not just the narrative of the sort of the drug addict or the person who's sold this or whatever, because I feel like we've seen, and there have been a lot of sort of films and stories about addicts, and not that there shouldn't be more or whatever, but I think that sometimes it can get like a little pornographic in a way, like it's really it's really fetishy to show like heroin use on film, and like it's like really. And we just wanted to make a sort of different thing and wanted to sort of focus on the community around that, and the sort of ripples that leaves, and that a mother sort of at the center of this, who is not not grieving in the way that people want her to, or that an audience wants her to. To us, that was really important, and to Hilary as well, because that's sort of to me, what the movie is about grief, and it's about a family, but really for us, it was also talking about a feeling that we felt within the country at that time, especially after COVID. And it's a movement out of paralysis, not into a better world, but just into movement in some way. And that, is sometimes all the hope that's needed, or whatever, is just the ability to take a step forward. I'm rambling. I don't know.
No, you're fine. No. But like, speaking of the grief and stuff, though, there's like one line, and it's something along the lines of like, "Oh, she said she already cried," and it's like, what's like?
Yeah.
Like, I cried my one time. I'm good.
Yeah.
But like, that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, and it's this thing also of like, especially I think with parents who have had to make that decision to cut kids off, who have kids who are drug addicts, who have kids who they've had to, or they have in a way, they've been mourning their death since long before the kid was actually dead. And that, I think, is a real thing, is once you've been holding on to that for so long, and that feeling, and then the kid, it doesn't mean you just let go of that. You know what I mean? Like, grief, I think, is much more complicated for all of us. And ultimately it's her, it's her stepping back into the world, her, even, Olivia bringing her some sort of just like, shut up and live, walk, do something, like hurt, like it doesn't matter, just something, you need to move. But I think that can be a really difficult thing for people to see, especially with mother characters, because we have a sort of expectation of how we want our mothers to grieve, or if we want, you know what I mean? Or like, and we're like, bro, my mom is going to be way sadder than that.
Better be.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, but that's what it's about. She's finding her grief throughout the film. She's finding the ability to express it.
Well, first of all, I love Olivia anyway. Like, I love all her work, and Hilary as well. Like, can you talk about working with the two of them? And I love them together in this. Like, I love their dynamic. Yeah,
it was so fun. We knew that was sort of the heart of the movie, because she's really the sort of like agent of change for Marissa. And so, Olivia had been attached for years and years. We wrote the script 6-7 years ago. She's been attached to it basically since then. And then the movie didn't get made, obviously, for a number of years. And then, in case you didn't notice,
just a few.
So when it came time to finally make it, it was sort of this pie in the sky idea of like, well, Hilary would be unbelievable, right? And part of that was because she is so sharp, and Olivia needed, I think that both characters needed that to go against each other. They're both tough, they're both smart, but they believe different things. And so that was some of the most fun scenes to shoot, was them two, like at the diner or something like that, where they're just getting to sort of like go off each other. And that was such a privilege and like a pleasure to watch happening. And that's a diner that's like we would get egg sandwiches from every day in middle school.
Oh, really?
We, like, shut it down. There was, it was fucking sick. It was so cool. There was like drug dealers outside doing security. It was crazy.
Well, what was it like filming there then?
There were like definitely some intense moments, but the community was really in support of us. We work with a youth group that Madison, my co-writer, and I have been best friends since we were kids. We're like the very early members of, and it's sort of right in the South End near where we grew up. And so we had a lot of those kids working on the film, and like a bunch of that youth group had worked on our first film, As You Are, including this kid who was 15, this kid Taufik Abijako, who was painting on shoes that we were giving him from wardrobe, and then started a brand called Head of State that became this massive brand that like Anna Wintour is obsessed with. He's like dressing people for the Met Gala. So he came and did our wardrobe, and that was such a trip, because it was like, how 6-7 years later or whatever, 8 years later, you're there, and this kid who was like 15 years old coloring on sneakers is now running doing the wardrobe for the movie and is killing it. and his friends are around, so in that way it was really cool. And that was such a gift of the experience.
Yeah. Oh, that's so amazing. That's gonna be so cool. Like, hey, I remember you being like this big, and now you're like
Yeah. And he
massive.
said the same thing. He's like, bro, I remember when you were,
Yeah, right. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So, but speaking back to like Olivia and Hilary, was
Yeah.
there anything they kind of improvised, or was it all stuff right off the script? Or
It's funny. I assumed there was going to be a lot more improvised. But then when they were saying the lines, it's a stupid thing to say, but sometimes like you realize an actor is as good at their job as they are when they make a line is stupid and it's just in there to like is like needed, but you're like, this is dumb and I don't know a way to not make it dumb. And then they say it and you go, what a great line. Like, you see it in the scene and you're just like, holy moly, Madison, we're geniuses, dude. That was great. But so there was a lot of that of going, well, that line sounded great. And maybe, because Hilary has an incredible method of sort of, she doesn't like learn the lines of the other person when she's learning her lines. So like she's read the script, she's done her work, but what's going on, you know what I mean? But she doesn't use that as part of her like memorization. So her first few takes are pure reaction. And we try to facilitate that as much as possible by shooting a close up first, but you know what I mean? By like not giving her a sense of where to go in the space, but not blocking it out super hard. And that's when and that's also her being as good as she is. She can say like, hey, this is how I work best, and then you kind of can realize the power that you have at your disposal. Because she'll take a scene wherever she doesn't have, she's not fighting for control in a scene. She's completely at peace in her character. And that's like, there's no nerves in that way. She'll just be like, popping some peanuts or whatever. And then like, all right, let's go. Very, marvelous. So, and I think that for both of them, it was really exciting, because they have some really beautiful, I think very beautiful scenes together, especially when they're looking at the photographs and sort of bonding and talking. And you realize that like the thing that brings these people together is they both have this huge hole in their heart, that like, that they're not going to be able to fill. And Marissa in a way understands that she's ahead of her in that, but it's a way that Marissa is actually able to give love, which is something that we've never seen, and that really, there were lines that were shaved off and cut when we were looking at it because they just have really good bullshit detectors. So if there's some, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you need to muscle a line in but I think that one maybe had the most sort of little changes and things like that. But it was so, it's that thing of like, you're watching the monitor and you kind of forget you're watching a monitor and you're like, whoa, what's this cool movie I'm watching? you're like, and yeah, it's cool. Especially there was like those shots because you had the two cameras on their POVs and it's like kind of dark behind her. And I remember we were all like outside the tiny room looking at the monitor and just like, holy moly.
Like, this is working.
They're really good. Yeah. And that was like, and every time like the actor would come and watch another one do a scene, they'd be like, God damn, they're really good.
Yeah, I mean, they're both incredible. And so to have them together is great. Even just the little scenes like when they're shopping and Olivia's like looking at the text messages and she's like, hello, like are you
yeah, totally.
I love that. And then speaking of that too, the text messages, I love how you guys like put it on the screen instead of like looking at a phone, trying to zoom in or have her like read it out loud or whatever. Was that kind of always the plan? Because it works very well.
Good. No, that was like very kind of 11th hour, actually. How the layout would be. We knew but it's that thing of like, you don't want to have to cut to a phone every time. Do you have to sort of do this? And so you watch who's done it best. And it's like that, but that was mostly in post. Like I think when we were shooting, there's a few shots where it was designed for it. The one thing we knew is that there is this rack focus when a body fall. There's like a jump scare.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yes.
And so the design was always that would rack focus from what you're looking at, from the numbers or whatever, to that thing. So we had a sense that it was going to be that we were going to put the text in the space, but we didn't totally know how to. But yeah, I really like it in that in that scene when they're shopping, because it's sort of, I don't know. I think it's kind of cheeky and funny.
It is, because it like reminds me of like, there's always times where we go shop, we're doing something with someone and we're like on our phone and they're like, hello, are we doing this together? Or are you just
and it shows like a development, in their relationship to a degree, which I think is super important. Yeah.
And then, so there's a lot of dark subject matter, right? In this, there's a lot of heavy stuff. So did you guys try to keep things like light at times when you weren't filming, or were you just kind of
all
like
doom and gloom?
Yeah.
All doom and gloom. No.
Let's be miserable together.
No. It was, I think, very light. I mean, maybe to my detriment, I like being very sort of up and jokey and keeping people that I think that just keeping people excited about the work that they're doing is really important. And our whole crew was, they were just great. I mean, their spirits were great, and they were so bonded that they were having fun together. And then when you it's also this thing of like, either when you're a low budget movie, which this is a tier 1 movie, so it's, so we would have had 30 times more 20 years ago to make this movie. You know what I mean? But it can either be a real bummer of a challenge, because it's like, these guys want me to do stuff that like we don't have the money or time or ability to do. Or it can be, okay, how do we figure out how to do this? And if you're having fun problem solving with the people you're problem solving with, and you think that it could go towards something else, then that like difficulty of like, okay, but we can't afford a crane any day, like on any day. So how do we do all of this? Then it becomes like, all right, well, maybe we can get 100 feet of track. Maybe we can do this, and people get really excited because it's like they're ultimately buying into and solving problems for something and for people that they care about. No, I think it was pretty light. I mean, there's, you're watching some of those scenes and it's definitely.
Yeah, I know. Like, this is a little depressing. I'm a little sad.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great though. I love the idea of like everyone bonding together over problem solving. But what would you think was your biggest challenge in this?
Balancing the tones was really hard. But that was sort of like a bigger thing because we didn't want to do straight thriller, straight drama. For us, it sort of lived in that noir territory. The fact that we were able to shoot on that train was insane, and was like a feat of producing by my producers and executive producers to make that happen. But we only had 2 hours to shoot on that train. And if you see that entire chase from once they're out of the car, all through the parking lot, through the train station, through all that, we shot all of that on the same day. So, and that day my DP and gaffer had COVID, so they were out. And it was the most expensive.
Add some more.
It was the most expensive day by like a factor of like 10 or something like that, And that was the most difficult day of shooting I've ever had. I got motion sick trying to shoot both of their coverage on that train, and then as I'm like getting motion sick and like Hilary's watching me going like sheet white, I'm also realizing we're just, every second that we have to stop, we're just losing time because the train won't stop. It's just barreling to Vermont and we just have to get it. So it's like a ticking time bomb is just like going off of like, we can never afford this again. We'll never be able to do this. So like, and then, so that just led to a panic attack, obviously. It's just like, oh, that's a nightmare. I'm definitely going to be sick. That's a huge nightmare. And then, so I had to like, literally, I couldn't hold the camera anymore. I had to like lay down in a car away with a tiny monitor. And I had to like tell Hilary and Madison, like, you gotta do this, do this. And they would run back and like, okay, we're doing this. But what's awesome about that is that there's a moment in the movie, and this is just like how cool Hilary is, and what like a excited like artist she is. There is this shot in that moment where I was like laying down sick, looking at the monitor, and the train is barreling, and she has the cameraman, Austin, the operator has the camera over her shoulder, and we're doing the POV through the thing to the hand. And I just hear Hilary go like, oh, look at the reflection, rack to the reflection. And so the guy racks to her reflection in the thing. And I remember looking at the monitor and being like, that's so cool. Like, about to throw up. And it's in the movie.
Oh man, well, I'm glad you powered through that moment and you made it. That does sound like a nightmare. You're sick, this is your one shot to do it. Like, I can't even imagine what that was like. Well, it pulls off. I would never have known that you were laying there.
Good.
Motion sickness. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank
Congratulations on the film.